Hello, and welcome back to another comparison blog post where I throw all the nuance from the Japanese chapter back into the English one, or at least the important stuff. This time late because once again I have food poisoning, I swear. I can't even use frozen vegetables. I guess it's my fault for trying to cheat by not cutting up my own broccoli. I'm still salty about frozen broccoli giving me food poisoning when I've been cooking all of my own meals. Anyway, moving on to the chapter. The cover. The title of this chapter was Kawaii, and the official translated that to cute. Just like always, there were several places in the chapter where this title was used. We have Koji's frogs, Hidari's cat book, and we also have smiles from two more unexpected characters, Jura and Boruto. Some people might describe their smiles as cute. Overall, I don't think there's a lot of deep thought put into this. It's kind of surface level. You can talk about the kanji that make up the word cute, but they're not even used here. It's specifically put in hiragana, so we'll just move on to other things. Text behind Hidari. Kotae o motome kiba o togu. My translation is, sharpen your fangs, to find your answers. This could also translate to, hone your fangs, which would give it a little bit of a different meaning, but more oftentimes than not, it's translated to sharpen. Either way, this phrase in Japanese, kiba o togu, is kind of a metaphor for polishing your skills or making your strong points even stronger. I think this text is interesting for a lot of reasons, mostly because Hidari was reading a book about cute cats this chapter. It's a stark juxtaposition, the same way Jura suddenly switching from philosophical speech down to teenage slang was. The fangs that Hidari seems to be sharpening are humanity. It goes back to the line Boruto says about the Shinju never being anything more to him than just trees. Of course he wants Sasuke back and is willing to eliminate Hidari to achieve that end. But the more that Jura and Hidari learn about love and friendship and humanity, the more it's going to hurt Jura when Hidari eventually goes down. This leads me down the rabbit hole of a theory, which I usually don't throw into these analysis posts, but I think it's an interesting discussion point. Jura is learning about love and friendship. Sarada loves Boruto, Boruto is a childhood friend. Sarada is about to purposefully be captured by Code and likely taken to the Shinju hideout. Boruto might have a lot more to worry about if Jura figures out what's going on between him and Sarada, especially if his goal is to take down Hidari. The theory here is basically that Code won't be an issue in making sure Sarada stays safe. Boruto and Sarada could definitely take on Code, but now they might have to take on Code, Jura, and Hidari all at once, because Boruto can't do long-distance Raijin instantly. I think it's almost time for Momoshiki to emerge. Sarada is really going to have to hold on to that hope, and I also think she'll be the one to break Boruto out of the deal he made with the devil, but we shall see. Text at the top. Konoha ni otozureta tsukanoma no heian, sono naka de Amado wa Kawaki o yobidashi. A brief moment of peace visits Konoha. Amidst this peace, Amado requests to see Kawaki. Interesting that they chose to highlight the Kawaki moment for this part, but I suppose the cliffhanger of this chapter was also the answer to why Amado wanted to see Kawaki. Where will this lead? Page 1 side text. 愛の探求者ジュラと生まれたばかりの怪物ヒダリ。二人はマムシの死をどう解釈する? My translation, the love enthusiast Jura and the newly born monster Hidari. How will these two interpret Mamushi's death? Nothing really much needs to be said about this, so let's jump straight into the interpretation. Jura's philosophy on Mamushi's death, page 2. 本能の赴くまま、愛嬌に身を焦がし、そのまま燃え尽きていた. Official is, driven by instinct, he gave into his desires and ended up burning out. Literal is, while proceeding in the direction of his instincts, his body burned with insatiable desire, and he stayed alight until he burned completely out. So obviously in my live stream, I discussed there was a word here, which had some interesting implications. So now it's time to talk about that word. This is the translated definition of aiyoku. I'll just let you read it. Aiyoku refers to a strong blank desire for the opposite blank, or an obsession with material possessions or pleasure. It describes a state that involves not just simple affection, but also a voracious, insatiable desire. Yep, moving on. That is what Mamushi was burning with. Jura is talking here about how he pursued that passion right up until the moment he died. Now you can share the ick of knowing right along with me. You're welcome. Page 3 is still Jura talking. やつの生き様、人心中という種としての繁栄を望むその姿勢には、私自身たぎるものを感じはしたが、Official. His philosophy on life was that we divine trees would thrive as a species, while it incited excitement inside me. The literal is, his attitude towards life, his position of wishing for Shinju to prosper as a species, brought forth a surge of great emotion bubbling from within me, but... Note, the word Jura uses for species here, while it is the kanji that starts the word species or scientific classification, shurui, the word is cut in half and only uses the first kanji, which actually means seed or tanin. The word for a surge of great emotion bubbling, tagiru mono is actually the word for water boiling or emotions surging greatly within one's heart. 一方で動物的かつ短絡的、不完全な生命体がゆえの過当な発想に過ぎないとも言える。Official, you could also say it was no more than an animalistic, short-sighted base mindset of an imperfect life form. Literal is, controversially, one could also argue that it's nothing more than a primitive way of thinking, an all too animalistic and short-sighted notion that arises from the limitations of imperfections inherent in living beings. Jura's speech is so philosophical. I'm sure you saw me struggling with this line if you were in the stream, but the literal is how it sounds. Obviously, you can't pack all that into a few speech bubbles. What a notion. Now you can really see the juxtaposition of his slang later. Either way, Jura's thought process is quite interesting. He understands Mamushi's instincts as a form of love, and he comments on the animal-like nature of that love as an instinct coming from a primitive life form, and he agrees with the prospect of Shinju wanting to prosper as a species, but how will he react when he realizes Boruto has no intentions of allowing him to prosper no matter what he does? It will be quite interesting indeed. Then he asks Hidari, who is reading a book about cats, what he thinks. Poor guy is contemplating life's biggest questions, and he's got someone reading picture books to bounce off of. Hidari's response on page 4. Hidari starts talking about Mamushi's soul thorn, and then he says something interesting. 時間的な猶予がなさすぎた. Official, there just wasn't enough time. Implied meaning. The available time window was so short that there was no room for delays, mistakes, or careful consideration. This word, yuyu, here is important because it isn't suggesting that there wasn't enough time in general, but that the window between Mamushi turning into a soul thorn and rotting wasn't significant enough for them to reclaim it. If you remember, Jura was actively on the location and saw Sarada and use soul thorn shortly after they took shape, as well as Matsuri's, and chose not to do anything. This time, he wasn't on location, although arguably he would have had an easy time getting there, and Boruto also mentioned that it would rot fairly quickly as well. Jura probably believed in Mamushi's abilities to do his thing by himself, so he didn't go to, attempt to back him up at all. And once he dissolved and faded away, then he wouldn't have been able to use the claw marks to teleport straight there because they would have all been dissolving. So he would have had to, go somewhere near there, and that would have cost him too much time. Because Boruto was already preparing to Raijin away to the other dimension, and he technically could have gone to the Ten Tails dimension and waited to ambush Boruto, but Code was already doing that, and all it took was a short conversation, and Boruto probably would have tried to fight with Jura. Or, escaped and just let it rot. Anyway, that's just gonna... One might say Jura didn't have the confidence he could take on everyone at the location to get it back. One might also say he was hoping Boruto would revive Bug, and yet another might say he didn't care enough about Bug to do anything about it. The world may never know. Using my implied meaning quote, feel free to make your own interpretation. Either way, that ties on into the next part. なぜ復活させたんだ? わざわざ俺を. Why did you bring me back? Literal is, why did you go out of your way to revive me? Hidari seems to be questioning why Jura actively went to the location just to snipe Boruto from a distance and steal the soul thorn and bring it back when he had the opportunity to do it for the others and didn't. This makes Hidari special to Jura in a way that the others aren't. As Chidori53 on Reddit put it, the villains are discovering the power of friendship, and as I will now add on, the only thing that can top the power of friendship in a manga is usually the power of love, and Boruto as a manga seems to predominantly display the effects of the power of love, and it is what Jura is curious about as well, so that's another interesting point. Moving on. In Jura's slang on pages 6 to 7, you guys likely noticed the callback to Hidari saying Yerokimoi, or major ick or totally ick. But I bet you didn't know that Jura used the same word as Chocho last chapter unless you were in my live stream. So let's take a look at what exactly Jura says after he questions if he gave Hidari the ick, shall we? 勘弁してくれ。ガチでいなくなったりするなよ. Official is, forgive me. Don't disappear on me, you hear? The literal is, give me a break. Seriously, don't disappear on me. This is the moment where Jura intentionally drops his level of speech to a teenager. Bro has been speaking in the most philosophical tones of philosophy, contemplating the meaning of life and everything in it, and right here he sounds like Inoshikacho, Inojin's dryness, Shikadai's nonchalantness, and Chocho's slang, all in one sentence. To break this down a little bit more, kanben shitekure can be give me a break, cut me some slack, seriously man, etc. Gachide is the line Chocho used last chapter to say Boruto was legit. It also means seriously, for real, no lie, no cap, etc. This isn't stepping too terribly far into Gen Z territory, but it's definitely a far cry from Jura's usual level of speech and more towards Hidari's totally ick. It's him actively attempting to make a joke, and that's why he gives a wry smile at the end. when Hidari says it doesn't completely disgust him, he responds with, really? And the words he actually says there is hontoni, which the official translates to just really. The important thing to point out here is how it's not written in kanji but instead katakana for emphasis, and has a ni at the end instead of a ka, and includes a question mark. This feels like Jura is still trying to sound like a teenager, although again, it isn't quite girly teenager level like Hidari's ik was. But I feel like if he was still in his usual Jura mode, he would have phrased it as sou nano ka yo, or honto ka, instead of this casual hontoni. Shiraishi Optical. This is just a little detail, but the name of the store Sarada walks out of is Shiraishi Megane. Shiraishi is just a surname. A lot of stores in Japan are family-run businesses, and they just use the name of the person as the name of the store, so it's literally just Shiraishi glasses. But in this case, it makes sense to change glasses to optical in English to make it sound more like a store. That's where this likely comes from. Shiraishi also holds the meaning of white stones in the game Go. There's the island that's part of the Okoyama prefecture, which wouldn't be relative to Konoha at all, I don't think. Mai Shiraishi is a popular actress and a model. Ginza Diamond Shiraishi is one of Japan's premier bridal jewelry retailers. But the other thing that's interesting to note here is the kanji. Shiro, or white, can mean obviously white, purity, clarity, honesty, blankness, light. These are all the things like the name kind of encompasses. Well, ishi, or stone, means solidarity, permanence, reliability, and also doubles as the word will if you think back to the Mitsuki's will arc in Stone Village, because stone and will both sound like the same word, ishi, in Japanese, even though they use different kanji. So technically, while this is just an average last name, this could sound like clear will or honest reliability, which is what Sarada has kind of been encompassing now that she's got her glasses back and had that talk with her mom. Just a cool detail. As always, Ikemoto is on point with kanji usage. When I sit down after the initial of translating the chapter, I usually come across something where I'm like, wait, that's so cool, why didn't I notice that? Probably because you only had 2 hours of sleep and were running on pure adrenaline and granola bars. Anyway, Amado and Kawaki. There wasn't much to note nuance-wise about Amado and Kawaki's conversation. Usually the majority of nuance stuff is in emotional speech and not scientific speech, because there's a lot more ways to interpret and comment on nuance with emotions as opposed to data, facts, and percentages. I was double-checking my translations with the officials, and they're pretty much the same, so if you have any questions about anything that happened there, feel free to ask in the comments and I'll answer you. Boruto and Sarada. There's a few little things here and there to note with them, mostly things I already had in my translation that the official just doesn't really make note of. On page 22, when Boruto says, "I'm relieved that it seems like you can see alright," he also says tebasa, or, you know. Just because the other AI translation butchered this so badly, I wanted to doubly emphasize it here, but his line, "Gyaku ni yo, 見た目的にはむしろイケメンだろ? ただものじゃねえ感じ." The official is, and hey, it makes me look pretty cool, right? Like, totally word I can't say. The implied meaning is, if anything, doesn't it actually kind of make me look word I can't say? Gives off this whole he's not someone to mess with vibe. The word iketeru is half of the phrase ikemen, or hot guy, the word Chocho uses last chapter to describe Boruto and Kawaki, because ikemen comes from iketeru menzu, which it means like a guy who's got it going on, so remove the guy who's part, the men's part from that, and you've got what Boruto is calling himself. Handsome, cool, stylish, word I can't say, etc. We get the clarification in the next sentence. ただものじゃねえ感じ, where ただものじゃねえ means someone who isn't ordinary, gives off the vibe of someone being a tough guy, a skilled fighter, powerful, not someone to mess with, etc. I interpreted this scene as Boruto doing his best to make sure Sarada doesn't feel guilty about what happened and to let her know he doesn't mind at all. Meanwhile, she's calling him an idiot because he's reverted back to his childhood self a little bit. You also see a zoomed out panel with a little bit of a time skip where Boruto explains the stuff about code before Sarada responds to it, and potentially more conversation. I could comment about how in Japanese culture a lot of times dates are just 2 people sitting next to each other enjoying conversation because PDA isn't a thing, which is why the voice actors for Boruto and Sarada talked about the squid scene, saying how much like a date it was. I searched my watch history for the video and couldn't find it, so it must have been taken down. I couldn't find any of the voice actor interviews I watched back in the day anywhere, ugh. And now this kind of mirrors that with them just sitting far away from the village, under a tree alone, casually talking for this first bit of conversation. Boruto just so happened to use Sarada's name 3 times in places where it wasn't really necessary for him to even say it at all, but he said it to sound more sincere about what he was telling her. But hey, I don't want to get branded as someone who only cares about shipping when I literally sit down and break down everything else cultural-wise in the chapter just because I went too far into detail for one single scene. So we're moving on. 決して望みを捨てるな、その先。決して望みを捨てるな、この先、何があっても。Official is never give up hope, no matter what happens. The literal is Don't throw away the wishes you hold on to ever beyond this, no matter what happens. The Japanese is doing something interesting here because it doesn't just use the typical wistful word kibo for hope, it uses nozomi, and this entire sentence is in bold font. Nozomi is more like wishes, desires, things one holds in their heart. It's not just about hope for the future, it's more specific to that person's personal wants and emotional desires. Boruto is telling her never to give up hope on the things she's holding on to, not just to never lose this abstract idea of hope. This word nozomi is more often used in tragic contexts like war, last chances, etc. So for all of those theorizing that Boruto is telling Sarada this because he's about to plan to off himself and sell his soul, you're probably right. Neko Para on page 32. Some of you might have seen my tweet about this already, but the book Hidari is reading is titled Neko Para, Neko Paradise, where Neko means cat and Paradise means paradise. This is a callback to Jiraiya's books. The one Kakashi in specific always read was Icha Icha Paradise, which means make out paradise. In Japanese, a lot of times they take the first two syllables of something and make it into a shortened name. So like Ikemen that I described earlier, where it's Iketeru Menzu, or My Hero Academia, Boku no Hero Academia being abbreviated to Hiroaka, or Smash Bros, Smash Bros becoming Smabura, or Minecraft becoming Minecraft. It's the same thing here where Neko Paradise is long, so it becomes Neko Para. But that's why it says Neko Para at the top, because that's the shortened abbreviation form of it be like saying cat para. Either way, that's where that comes from. Shutdown codes on page 39. Here we learn a new shutdown code, Kashin Koji's cul-de-sac. That's the literal meaning of the word. Why did they decide not to use pun translation techniques to make it something else? I do not know. The word there is fukurokoji da, Kashin Koji. Fukurokoji literally means cul-de-sac or dead end, but because it's pronounced koji, which is the same as Koji's name, it becomes a pun. In my translation I had, it's the end of your road, or it's the end of your path, to kind of try and hit a pun on 10 paths, because it also means dead end, which I know is pretty good for a shutdown code. But while we're here, let's look at the other shutdown codes as well, because that was something I promised over on X. Code's limiter release is Dores kodo wa nai, there's no dress code. This one's pretty obvious because it's a foreign borrowed word that literally has Code's name in it, and Code's name itself is a foreign borrowed word. Because it's releasing his limiters, it's almost like allowing him to dress however he wants, hence there's no more dress code. Delta's is Mou neru jikan, which means time to go to sleep, Delta. I initially thought this was onene no jikan da yo, and I don't know why I remembered it like that, but either way, it's something you say to little kids. I think this is funny because Delta was supposed to resemble Amado's daughter, Akabi, so he probably programmed her shutdown code with a phrase that he would have used as a parent. Kawaki's is negoto wa nete ie, only babble in your sleep. This shutdown code is a testament to how much Amado doesn't like what Kawaki has to say about things. It's not a pun so much as it is quite literally save the sleep talk for when you're asleep. Or nothing you say ever makes sense, so just shut up already. It's usually used in context while the other party is demanding something unreasonable, making an absurd claim about something, the list goes on. You use this phrase to shut them up and tell them to keep dreaming. I don't know why I remember more of these being puns, but that's fine. Final page side text. Kyou kyou jitsu jitsu. Kawaki o tsukae, takumi ni kashin koji o rachi shita Amado. Kare no nerai wa ittai. Amado concocts a shrewd plan using Kawaki to kidnap Koji. What could his goal possibly be? Well, I think that's a good enough question to end things off on. What do you think his goal is? Thank you for listening to this very long chapter analysis. I hope you have a great rest of your day. See you next month.